How easy should it be to amend a state's constitution? Now, the federal constitution, we don't want it to be very easy to amend. In fact, it should be something where it really requires a true motivation that cuts across the entirety of the human condition in order for it to be worth amending. Something that has broad, bipartisan, multi generational, and multi ethnic impact. Something that actually creates a situation or is created by a situation where a not just a majority but a tremendous super majority of people of all walks of life are impacted by it and therefore want to make that change. But what about the state constitution? By the way, I am Brian Lusk. Thank you very much for joining me today. We're on my front porch, so let's go ahead and have a conversation. There will be a little bit of wind noise. We have just a touch of breeze, but I do believe we're still going to get good audio out of it. So let's get started. I'm holding here a copy of House Joint Resolution number 43. This is specific, by the way, this whole video is specific to the state of Missouri, even though there will be principles in it that apply to any state. But right here, House Joint Resolution 43 is about changing the method of amending the Missouri state constitution to introduce concurrent majority ratification. Now, what is concurrent majority ratification? Well, if you look at the original Constitution, you'd see there are several aspects that actually reflect this principle that was originally written into our founding documents. I'll take the biggest one, which is the Electoral College. With the Electoral College, you cannot go to just the three big states, California, New York, and Texas, and get their support and come away with winning the presidency of the United States. You have to carry more states across a broad spectrum of ideologies and walks of life. This makes it so that no candidate can truly come from a radical position on either side. I mean, this cuts both ways. So no candidate can come from extreme left or extreme right and easily win the presidency of the United States. Clearly, there's been some issues there, but that is the principle behind concurrent majority ratification, is that anything that you do should be broadly applicable across many walks of life and broadly supported, not just by the tiniest of majorities. It prevents tyranny of the majority. What's tyranny of the majority, you might ask? Well, many of you already know. This is where the majority becomes the tyrants of the political system. Since they have the majority, they can run roughshod over those in the minority without any consideration for their rights. And that is what democracy actually creates. Raw democracy creates a tyranny of the majority, where the majority no longer has to even consider the rights and the thoughts and the concerns of the minority. That's what we're trying to avoid here. Another place where that was originally reflected in our founding documents was in the election of House versus Senate, a bicameral legislature. The House was intended to represent the will of the people down close to the individuals in their individual states, not representing the states, but the people within those states in the legislature of the United States. Similarly, in the opposite vein, actually, senators were supposed to be appointed by the states to represent states' interests. So if something passed the House and passed the Senate, it would have broad support of both the people and the states, and therefore would have legislation that would be good for everybody in theory. At least that's the idea. The problem is that the moment that senators were put into direct election by the citizens of their states, they no longer represent the interests of the states. And therefore, there's no check and no balance anymore. There's no competing interest that ensures that only the best and most broadly supported legislation is in fact what makes it through. So that's the principle of concurrent majority ratification. In each of these situations, you end up with not just a majority being required, but a broad-based majority across all walks of life. Now, the reason House Joint Resolution comes up is because they're trying to, with this resolution, change the way in which amendments to the Missouri State Constitution can come about. And in its first version, as represented before any amendments, it actually would have the state's congressional districts become the key piece that would be the area in which you would have to get support. If you can carry a majority of the 8 congressional districts in the state of Missouri, you can get your item passed. That's a step in the right direction, but it is not necessarily the right step. And let me tell you why. The reason being that if you look at our 8 congressional districts, there are major urban centers in at least 3 of them. And those 3 centers would then have an inordinate amount of power compared to if you did something different, say, House districts. That's in the current method. Now, before we go into anything further, as it currently stands, a simple majority is all that's required to pass a ballot measure. So this would make it so you could reasonably have a broader base of support for an amendment to the Missouri State Constitution. But a better method in between these options here would actually be to use House districts instead. This does give more power to rural voters, but in that same vein, it avoids the tyranny of the majority in the way that concurrent majority ratification actually carries out. The other kind of deal here is that this resolution has already been amended by the House and sent to the Senate. And the state senators need to know what you, as a citizen of the state of Missouri, want to see as your method for modifying the Missouri State Constitution. Now, they're looking at 2 different amended methods. One is that all methods of amending the Constitution have to go through this additional step of the concurrent majority ratification, meaning that they look at all of the House districts that vote for or against an amendment to the Constitution of the state of Missouri. You have to carry a majority of those House districts and a majority of the population of the state. That seems complicated, but if you think about this for just a moment, that preserves the power of the majority, especially those in the urban centers. Because if you can't get them to get on board with you to give you a majority, you're not going to get your amendment passed. But it also preserves the rights and the privileges of the people in the rural counties. Because if you can't get a majority of the of the House districts, I should say, on your side, then you don't have that broad support either. This makes it harder to amend the Missouri State Constitution. It also prevents both the far right and the far left from seizing control and becoming that tyranny of the majority. The other option that is coming up, or option 2, is for the petition process to be the only one affected by it. And as it is written for the amendment as it is. Now, I'm going to back up one step here. The petition process means that you bring a petition to the citizens of the state of Missouri. 10% of them sign off of the voting base of Missouri that they want this to be on the ballot, and then it goes to the ballot. The other methods of amending the Constitution are the legislative way of doing it, as in it goes through the House and the Congress of the state of Missouri, the legislature of the state of Missouri, gets passed through both of those houses and then goes to a vote of the people, or a constitutional convention. If we set up and engage in a constitutional convention, you can get it through that process as well. So option 1 affects all methods of amending the Missouri State Constitution, specifically that It would make it so you have to have a majority of the House districts and a majority of the population of the state in order to be able to pass an amendment. Whereas option 2 means it only affects the petition method, where you would have to do a petition. What that means is that the legislature still has the short route to get an amendment through the Constitution. So does the Constitutional Convention method, which has its own craziness involved with it. Let's just say if you start a Constitutional Convention, you've now opened up the whole Constitution for amendment. There's no limits on those things. So you got to be careful with that one. But the petition only one only affects the petition method, and it also references the congressional districts, not the House districts. That would mean you only have 8 districts, more fingers than I've got. You don't have 8 districts, and those 8 districts, you have to carry a majority of those and a majority of the population for only the petition method. So thoughts. If you are in the state of Missouri and you are and you have thought this through and looked at this, I will have links in the description of the video for you to take a look at. You should contact your senator and tell them which method you want, either the one that affects the petition, legislation, and convention methods and uses the House districts as one of the ratification methods, or the one that is a petition only one. Both are an improvement over our current setup. There is some pros and cons listed here. If you look at Missouri First, that kind of goes through this. I'm not necessarily sold on some of them. For one thing, I don't think that there should be a weird method of doing it. Something that kind of gets out of that pulls one of the methods out and makes it different than the other two. So if it was me, and in fact, I will be contacting my senator, I want option 1, specifically the petition, legislative, and convention, for the House representatives being one of the ratification methods. It's important. If you live in the state of Missouri, you don't want a radical fringe that doesn't represent you to be able to shove a constitutional amendment down your throat. And that's everything for today in the view from my front porch. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below or send me an email to brianlusk@zohomail.com. We'll be watching for responses. Also, if you want to join in on my currently very short mailing list, when I post these videos, go ahead and send me an email there as well. Eventually, we'll get to an automated method, but for now, I'm just hand adding it to a little list. So I'll be watching for you. Before I go, though, want to let you know about some upcoming videos. I'm doing deep dive research on our presidential candidates for 2024. As I get the information together and I'm able to put together thoughts on their history and on their positions, I will be putting together videos for you. That'll be over the next several months, and I expect there'll be a lot of them. This does not necessarily imply an endorsement. It just means I've done some extra research so you can know what kind of people we're trying to put in the top seat in the land. You have a good one, and we will see you on the next one.